Welcome to the listening room, a quiet place for long-form thought, calm exploration, and deep understanding. Settle in, and let's begin. When we say the phrase, "how the mind activates muscle," most people imagine something simple and mechanical. A thought appears, a command is sent, and the body moves. It feels like a button being pressed. But what we are really talking about is something far more layered and quietly remarkable. We are talking about how intention becomes movement, how awareness becomes force, how something invisible inside you, attention, expectation, and readiness, shapes the physical behavior of your body before a single fiber shortens. This matters far more than we usually realize. Every time you reach for a cup, take a step, stand up from a chair, hold your posture, breathe through effort, or carry tension without noticing it, the mind is shaping muscle activity long before you experience the movement itself. Your body is not simply reacting to commands, it is constantly predicting, preparing, filtering, and adjusting. Movement is not only something you do, it is something your nervous system carefully constructs. We care about this topic because movement is one of the most basic expressions of being alive. It is how we interact with the world. It is how we protect ourselves. It is how we express intention. And for many people, especially those who train, rehabilitate, manage chronic discomfort, or simply want to feel more connected with their bodies, there is a quiet frustration that sits underneath effort. We try harder, we push more, we repeat the motion, yet something still feels disconnected. The muscle does not respond the way we expect. The movement feels weak, unstable, awkward, or tiring in ways that do not make sense. This episode is not about athletic performance alone. It is about understanding how your nervous system organizes movement so that effort becomes coordinated instead of scattered. It is about seeing that what you call muscle control is actually a conversation between perception, attention, memory, and prediction. It is about realizing that the quality of your focus often determines the quality of your movement. Across history, humans have sensed this long before modern neuroscience could explain it. Martial traditions, meditative practices, physical disciplines, and rehabilitation methods have all emphasized awareness, breath, posture, and mental imagery. They may use different language, but they all point toward the same observation. How you attend to your body changes how your body behaves. This subject helps us understand a very practical problem that many people quietly struggle with. Why does training sometimes fail to translate into better movement? Why does rehabilitation stall even when effort is consistent? Why does tension appear in places that were never supposed to be working so hard? And, perhaps most importantly, how can we learn to move with less friction between what we intend and what our body produces? Tonight, we are not rushing toward techniques. We are slowing down to understand the system itself. We are exploring how the mind prepares the body for movement, how attention reshapes motor signals, and how subtle internal awareness alters muscular coordination. This is not a story of motivation, it is a story of organization. Before we go deeper, it is worth noticing something quietly profound. You are already using this system, right now. You are sitting, listening, adjusting posture, shifting weight, blinking, breathing. Your mind is already activating muscle in complex and precise ways without asking for permission. The only question is whether you are aware of the process that is already unfolding. This episode will show that the mind does not merely send commands to muscles, but actively organizes movement by shaping attention, prediction, and sensory awareness before and during every action. By the end of this lecture, You will gain a clearer understanding of how mental focus changes muscular activation, how perception and movement are inseparable, and why learning to move well begins with learning to notice more precisely. We will explore this calmly, using evidence-based reasoning and grounded observation, not performance myths or exaggerated claims. This is a thoughtful examination of how your nervous system quietly constructs movement and how small shifts in awareness can change the quality of effort itself. Our goal is not to train harder. Our goal is to understand better. Chapter 1: The Silent Conversation Between the Brain and the Body. Before a muscle contracts, something else happens. Long before force is produced, the nervous system is already preparing the movement. This preparation does not occur in a single location. It unfolds across networks that integrate vision, balance, memory, body position, and intention. The brain is not waiting for you to decide to move. It is constantly running simulations of what might happen next. When you decide to lift your arm, the nervous system does not simply activate the shoulder muscles. It adjusts posture in advance. It stabilizes the spine. It anticipates changes in balance. It alters breathing patterns. It subtly shifts muscle tone throughout the body. All of this happens before you experience the movement as starting. This is the first essential idea of mind-muscle connection. Muscle activation is the final visible expression of a much larger internal process. The brain constructs movement using predictions. It estimates how heavy an object will be. It estimates how far the arm must travel. It estimates how much stability the body will require to remain upright. These estimates are built from previous experiences. Your nervous system is not neutral. It carries memory into every motion. This is why the same exercise can feel completely different on different days. Fatigue, emotional stress, pain history, and attentional focus all modify how the nervous system predicts the upcoming movement. The body does not respond to reality directly. It responds to the brain's expectation of reality. One of the most important and often overlooked elements in this conversation is sensory feedback. Muscles contain receptors that continuously report length, tension, and rate of change. Joints report position and pressure. The skin reports contact and stretch. The inner ear reports head movement and balance. The brain does not simply issue instructions, it constantly compares predicted movement with incoming sensory data and adjusts activation in real time. This is not a one-way command system, it is a loop. Your mind activates muscle by coordinating prediction and feedback at the same time. When this loop is stable and accurate, movement feels smooth and efficient. When it becomes noisy, uncertain, or overloaded, movement becomes tense, hesitant, or fragmented. This is where attention quietly becomes powerful. When you direct attention to a specific area of the body, you are not merely observing it. You are sharpening the sensory resolution of that region. You are increasing the precision of the information flowing back into the nervous system. The brain begins to treat that information as more relevant. This is why simply placing awareness on the working muscle often changes how the movement feels. The nervous system adjusts its internal model. It refines its predictions. It redistributes effort. What people call activating a muscle is often the result of improved sensory clarity rather than increased force output. The mind is not forcing the muscle to work harder, it is allowing the nervous system to organize the movement more accurately. This distinction is subtle, but it is foundational. When a person struggles to feel a muscle working, the problem is rarely a lack of strength, it is often a lack of sensory representation. The brain cannot refine what it cannot clearly perceive. When perception becomes fuzzy, the nervous system compensates by recruiting broader, less specific patterns of activation. This is how unnecessary tension develops. In other words, poor mind-muscle connection is rarely about laziness. It is usually about information quality. The nervous system depends on clarity to reduce effort. When information is precise, fewer muscles are needed to achieve stability and control. When information is uncertain, the body solves the problem by stiffening. It recruits more muscle groups than necessary to create a sense of safety. This explains a pattern that appears across training and rehabilitation. When people feel unstable, uncoordinated, or unsure of their movement, they unconsciously increase muscular tension. The body seeks predictability, even if it comes at the cost of efficiency. The mind is therefore not only activating muscle, it is regulating threat and safety at a very low level of movement control. Subtle uncertainty can produce real, measurable changes in muscle tone. This also explains why slow, controlled movement often feels more difficult than fast or explosive movement. Slow movement exposes prediction errors. It forces the nervous system to rely more heavily on sensory feedback. It demands higher resolution awareness. Fast movement can rely more on pre-programmed motor patterns. Slow movement requires continuous correction. This is why deliberate attention during movement feels mentally tiring. The brain is working harder to integrate information. The relationship between intention and muscle is therefore not a straight line. It is a layered negotiation between what you expect, what you feel, and what the nervous system believes will keep the body stable. And here is a quiet but important realization. You do not consciously control most of this process. You influence it. Your awareness can guide which signals become prioritized. Your focus can refine which sensations are amplified. Your expectations can shape how much uncertainty the nervous system anticipates. But the true activation of muscle is managed beneath conscious thought. This is not a limitation, it is a design feature. If you had to consciously compute posture, balance, and force distribution for every movement, you would not be able to function in daily life. Mind-muscle connection is therefore not about micromanagement, it is about cooperation. This is why simple cues such as noticing pressure through the foot, feeling the breath expand the rib cage, or sensing length through the spine can suddenly change how an entire movement pattern organizes itself. You are not commanding individual muscles, you are adjusting the informational landscape the nervous system uses to construct the movement. Over time, repeated attention reshapes internal maps of the body. Areas that were previously vague become more distinct. Coordination becomes easier because the brain has better data to work with. The movement does not feel forced, it feels guided. This is also where frustration often arises. When people try to activate a muscle through effort alone, they often override sensory refinement with brute recruitment. They contract harder, brace more aggressively, and narrow their breathing. The nervous system receives strong signals, but not necessarily accurate ones. The loop becomes louder, not clearer. Learning how the mind activates muscle is learning how to improve communication inside your own nervous system. Before we continue, I want to ask you something simple and personal. As you listen right now, can you notice where in your body you feel the most tension without trying to change it? Just notice. That awareness alone is already shaping the conversation between your mind and your muscles. In the next chapter, we will explore how attention itself alters motor pathways and why internal focus can reorganize movement patterns in ways that strength training all alone cannot. Chapter 2. How Attention Reshapes Motor Control. If Chapter 1 showed us that movement is organized through prediction and feedback, then this chapter examines something even more subtle and quietly powerful: the role of attention in shaping the very pathways that carry movement signals. Most people think of attention as a mental spotlight, something you aim at an idea, a sound, or a task. But inside the nervous system, attention functions more like a signal amplifier. It changes which sensory information becomes more precise, which signals become prioritized, and which motor patterns become easier to access. When you focus on a muscle, a joint, or a region of the body, you are not merely thinking about it. You are altering the way the brain processes incoming sensory data from that area. The nervous system literally increases the gain on those signals. This matters because motor control does not emerge from commands alone. It emerges from the quality of information that guides those commands. Your brain constantly asks one quiet question while you move. How well do I know what is happening right now? Attention is how it sharpens the answer. When attention is directed inward, toward bodily sensation, the nervous system increases the resolution of proprioceptive input. Proprioception is the sense of position, movement, and force within your body. It is how you know where your arm is without looking. It is how you know how much tension you are producing. It is how you know whether a movement is stable or drifting. This sense is not passive. It is actively shaped by what the brain expects to be relevant. When you lift a weight while paying attention only to the external outcome, how many repetitions you complete, how fast you move, how heavy the load feels, the nervous system tends to organize movement around efficiency of outcome. It recruits patterns that get the job done quickly and reliably. When you lift the same weight while attending to how the movement unfolds inside the body, how the joint tracks, how tension distributes, how the muscle shortens and lengthens, the nervous system shifts its priorities. It begins refining how the movement is controlled, not merely whether the task succeeds. This distinction is critical. Both approaches can produce strength. Only one consistently produces improved movement organization. Attention acts as a filter for motor learning. The brain does not store repetitions, it stores relationships between sensation and action. It stores which internal signals predicted stability, which signals predicted success, and which signals predicted error. What you attend to determines which of those relationships are strengthened. This is why two people can perform the same exercise for the same number of repetitions with the same load and experience very different long-term changes in coordination. Their nervous systems were not learning the same thing. Internally focused attention increases the nervous system's sensitivity to small errors in movement. Tiny shifts in joint alignment, timing, and force distribution become detectable. When those errors become detectable, the nervous system can correct them. Externally focused attention often reduces awareness of those same errors. The nervous system solves the task using broader, more automated patterns. These patterns are not wrong, they are simply less refined. This is not a matter of one being superior in all contexts. It is a matter of what kind of adaptation you are creating. Attention changes what the nervous system treats as meaningful information. One of the most misunderstood ideas in mind-muscle connection is the belief that attention must be intense to be effective. In reality, excessive mental effort can interfere with motor coordination. When attention becomes strained, rigid, or overly analytical, it increases cognitive load. The nervous system becomes preoccupied with conscious control and loses access to fluid, automatic corrections. The most effective attentional state for motor refinement is calm, steady, and curious, not forceful. This calm attentional quality allows sensory feedback to remain available without being overridden by mental commentary. It creates a stable internal environment in which subtle adjustments can occur. This is why skilled performers often describe being aware without trying. The nervous system does not respond to mental pressure. It responds to clarity. There is another layer to this process that often goes unnoticed. Attention does not only sharpen sensation, it also modifies motor output directly. Regions of the brain responsible for planning movement become more excitable when attention is directed toward the body part involved. This increases the likelihood that smaller, more specific motor units will be recruited rather than large, generalized activation patterns. In simple terms, attention allows finer control. Without attention, the nervous system often relies on what are sometimes called motor synergies, pre-packaged patterns of muscle activity that simplify control. These synergies are efficient and reliable. They reduce computational demand, but they are also less flexible. When attention highlights a specific region or movement quality, the nervous system becomes more willing to break apart those synergies and reorganize them. This is one of the central mechanisms behind motor learning. Refinement requires temporary instability. When attention increases sensitivity to error, the nervous system becomes less comfortable. Movements may feel weaker, slower, or less coordinated at first. This is not failure, it is reorganization. Many people mistake this phase for regression. In reality, the system is dismantling an older pattern so that a more precise one can be built. This is why deliberate practice often feels awkward. Your nervous system is leaving a well-rehearsed path and exploring a narrower one. This exploration is guided almost entirely by attention. Another important and often overlooked factor is how attention interacts with emotional state. Anxiety, time pressure, self-judgment, and performance stress narrow attention. They bias the nervous system toward outcome-focused control. The body shifts towards safety-oriented strategies. These strategies typically involve increased muscle co-contraction and reduced variability. This creates stiffness. From the perspective of the nervous system, stiffness is stability, but stiffness also limits adaptability. When attention becomes emotionally neutral and observational, the nervous system tolerates more variability. It becomes willing to allow micro-adjustments instead of locking joints and bracing prematurely. This is not a psychological concept in the motivational sense. It is a physiological shift in control strategy. Your emotional state alters how much uncertainty your nervous system is willing to tolerate, and uncertainty is necessary for learning. This has practical implications that are especially important for people who train, rehabilitate, or live with chronic discomfort. If attention is constantly driven by fear of pain, fear of failure, or fear of instability, the nervous system will prioritize protection over refinement. It will limit exploration. It will choose stiffness over sensitivity. This is not weakness, it is survival logic. Understanding this helps explain why some individuals struggle to reconnect with certain muscles after injury, illness, or long periods of pain. The nervous system does not simply forget how to activate muscle, it reassigns priority. It changes what it believes is safe to explore. Attention becomes an access point to gradually reopen that exploration. Very small, slow, and precisely attended movements provide the nervous system with evidence that a region can be controlled without threat. This evidence gradually reduces protective stiffness. As stiffness reduces, sensory feedback improves. As sensory feedback improves, motor control becomes more precise. The loop slowly becomes healthier. It is not about convincing the body, it is about informing it. Another important dimension of attention is temporal. When attention is rushed, movement planning becomes coarse. The nervous system uses fewer predictive checks. It leans more heavily on habit. When attention is allowed to dwell in the unfolding of the movement itself, timing becomes more refined. The nervous system tracks transitions more accurately. When a muscle begins to lengthen, when force should transfer from one region to another, when stabilization must increase or decrease. This temporal awareness is one of the quiet markers of advanced motor control. Skilled movers are not only aware of where movement happens, they are aware of when. This is why slowing down is such a powerful learning tool. It stretches the sensory window. It gives the nervous system time to detect relationships that are invisible at higher speeds. Yet slowing down is also psychologically uncomfortable for many people. It removes momentum, it removes rhythm, it exposes small losses of control. Again, attention becomes the stabilizing force that allows this exposure to remain tolerable. When attention is steady, slow movement becomes informative rather than threatening. There is also an important misconception that attention should be fixed on a single muscle. In practice, effective attentional focus often shifts dynamically. Sometimes awareness is placed locally on a muscle, joint, or region. Sometimes it widens to include posture, breath, or whole body coordination. This oscillation between narrow and broad awareness allows the nervous system to integrate local control into global movement. Fixating on a single muscle for too long can fragment coordination. The mind does not activate muscle in isolation. It activates relationships. This is why cues that involve contact with the environment, feeling the ground, noticing pressure through the hands, sensing the weight of the body through the hips, often produce rapid improvements in internal muscle activation. The nervous system uses those environmental references to anchor internal organization. Internal attention becomes more effective when it is supported by external reference points. In other words, mind-muscle connection is not an inward retreat from the world, it is an integration between internal sensation and external context. Movement exists at that boundary. Before we move on, I want to invite you into a simple moment of observation. As you sit or stand right now, notice the contact between your body and whatever supports you, the chair, the floor, the ground. Then gently shift attention to one area of your body that feels active or tense. Do not try to change it. Just notice whether your awareness feels narrow, wide, or somewhere in between. Here's the question I want you to reflect on, and it's also the question that quietly shapes motor learning. When you move during your workouts, daily tasks, or rehabilitation, where does your attention usually live? On the outcome or on the experience of movement itself? In the next chapter, we will explore how mental imagery and intention interact with the motor system and why performing movement activates many of the same neural pathways as imagining it. Chapter 3: How Intention and Mental Imagery Activate the Motor System. Up to this point, we have explored how movement is organized through prediction and feedback, and how attention reshapes the quality of the information flowing through that system. In this chapter, we turn towards something that often feels mysterious to people when they first encounter it: the fact that simply intending a movement or imagining it clearly can activate many of the same neural circuits that produce physical action. This does not mean that imagining a movement replaces training. It means that the nervous system does not sharply separate thinking about movement from preparing to move. From the brain's perspective, intention itself is already part of the motor process. When you decide to move, the nervous system begins preparing patterns of activity even before the first visible contraction occurs. This preparation phase organizes posture, timing, and expected sensory feedback. Mental imagery enters this same preparatory network. When you imagine lifting your arm, your brain activates motor planning regions that would normally participate in executing the movement. The body does not move because inhibitory systems prevent full motor output, but internally, much of the coordination machinery is already engaged. This is why imagery can influence strength, coordination, and recovery. The nervous system rehearses. It is not rehearsing the appearance of movement, it is rehearsing the sensory consequences of movement. This distinction is subtle but important. Effective mental imagery is not visual in the cinematic sense, it is sensory motor. It involves imagining the feeling of tension building, the joint moving through space, the pressure changing through the feet or hands, the rhythm of breathing adjusting. When imagery becomes embodied rather than visual, the nervous system treats it as meaningful motor information. This is why some people find mental imagery ineffective. They are picturing movement as if watching themselves from the outside. The nervous system learns most effectively from first-person sensory simulation. The mind activates muscle most strongly when it imagines sensation, not appearance. This sensory-based imagery increases excitability in the motor pathways associated with the imagined movement. It primes those pathways for future activation. When physical practice follows, the nervous system finds the pattern more accessible. This priming effect is not dramatic, it is subtle, but over time it accumulates. This is one reason why musicians, athletes, and rehabilitation patients often use imagery to maintain skill during periods of reduced physical practice. The nervous system remains engaged with the pattern even when the body cannot perform it fully. But imagery does more than preserve patterns. It also helps reorganize them. Because imagery removes the mechanical constraints of the body, it allows the nervous system to explore alternative timing and coordination relationships without physical risk. It can test sequences. It can rehearse transitions. It can refine expectations of sensory feedback. In a very real sense, imagery gives the nervous system a safe laboratory. There's another important dimension of intention that we must clarify. Intention is not willpower. Intention is a directional signal. It tells the nervous system what outcome is being prepared. It does not specify how the body should accomplish it. The nervous system handles the how. When intention becomes contaminated by micromanagement, the system often becomes less efficient. Excess conscious interference disrupts the automatic coordination processes that have evolved to manage complexity. This is why skilled performers often describe their intention in very simple terms: reach, push, lift, flow. They are not describing muscle sequences, they are describing goals that the nervous system can translate into coordinated action. This simplicity is not ignorance, it is respect for how the system operates. The mind activates muscle best when intention is clear and non-intrusive. There is also an important relationship between intention and emotional tone. When intention is paired with urgency or pressure, the nervous system biases towards faster, coarser recruitment strategies. When intention is paired with calm readiness, the nervous system tolerates slower, more refined activation. This is not philosophy, it is an adaptive shift in motor strategy. Your emotional context influences how the nervous system prepares movement. This becomes especially important for individuals who have experienced injury, repeated pain, or long-term movement limitations. Their intentions may be shaped by caution. Even when consciously motivated, their nervous system may still prepare for threat. Imagery can become a gentle way to retrain expectation. By imagining movement that feels safe, stable, and controlled, the nervous system begins updating its predictions. Over time, those predictions influence how physical movement is prepared. Again, this is not about convincing yourself. It is about giving your nervous system alternative data. One of the most powerful aspects of imagery is that it allows you to slow down transitions that normally happen too quickly to notice. For example, the moment between relaxing one muscle group and engaging another is often compressed into milliseconds. Imagery can expand that transition. It allows the nervous system to notice coordination gaps that are usually masked by momentum. This improves sequencing. Better sequencing reduces unnecessary co-contraction. Reduced co-contraction improves efficiency. Efficiency improves endurance and control. The chain is quiet, but it is very real. Another important misconception is that imagery must be vivid to be effective. For many people, imagery is faint, sensation is muted, visualization feels unclear. This does not prevent the nervous system from benefiting. What matters is consistency and embodied intent, not cinematic detail. Even vague internal rehearsal activates motor planning networks. The nervous system responds to pattern, not artistry. There is also an important limit that must be respected. Imagery cannot replace the sensory richness of physical movement. It cannot fully update force calibration. It cannot replicate load, impact, or environmental interaction. It supports learning. It does not complete it. The mind activates muscle through imagery by preparing the system, not by finishing the task. In practical terms, imagery becomes most useful when paired with slow, attentive movement. Imagery primes, movement confirms, sensation corrects. Together, they form a powerful learning loop. Another layer worth exploring is the relationship between intention and confidence in movement. When the nervous system repeatedly rehearses successful movement, even internally, it begins to reduce uncertainty around that pattern. Lower uncertainty reduces protective stiffness. Lower stiffness improves sensory clarity. Improved clarity refines control. This is not a motivational boost. It is a recalibration of threat prediction. For people who have avoided certain movements because they feel unstable, weak, or painful, imagery allows gradual re-entry into that movement space without triggering defensive strategies. This is one of the reasons imagery is widely used in neurological and orthopedic rehabilitation. But we must be careful not to oversimplify. Imagery does not magically bypass physical limitation. It supports neural readiness. It does not rebuild tissue. The nervous system still requires physical exposure to load, range, and variability. However, imagery can make that exposure more precise and less chaotic. Another important but rarely discussed aspect of imagery is that it can expose attentional habits. When people attempt imagery, they often notice where their awareness becomes vague, where sensation disappears, or where mental noise interrupts continuity. These are not personal failures, they are informational gaps in the body map. Those gaps often correspond to areas that feel uncoordinated during real movement. In this way, imagery becomes a diagnostic tool. It reveals where the nervous system has poor resolution. This gives you a direction for where attention and slow physical exploration may be most beneficial. Before we move forward, I want to invite you into a brief moment of internal rehearsal. Imagine slowly lifting one arm. Do not picture how it looks. Imagine the sensation of the shoulder rolling, the upper arm floating upward, a slight shift in balance through your torso, the subtle change in pressure through your feet or seat, the rhythm of breathing adjusting.
Chapter 4. Why Posture, Breath, and Whole Body Organization Shape Local Muscle Activation. One of the most persistent misunderstandings about mind-muscle connection is the belief that the nervous system controls individual muscles as isolated units. In reality, the brain does not think in muscles. It thinks in movement goals, balance requirements, and whole-body relationships. Local muscle activity only makes sense within a global organizational framework. Every movement you perform is built on an internal estimate of where your body is in space and how stable it currently is. Before the nervous system allows a limb to move freely, it must be confident that the rest of the body can support that change. This is why posture and breathing are not accessories to movement. They are foundational. When you raise an arm, your nervous system subtly organizes the trunk, adjusts spinal tone, regulates pressure within the abdomen, and modulates breathing patterns. These adjustments are not consciously chosen, they are anticipatory. They occur before the limb moves. This anticipatory organization is sometimes referred to as postural preparation. It is not about standing upright or holding a particular shape. It is about how the nervous system distributes tone throughout the body to create a stable platform for motion. The mind activates muscle by first activating stability. But stability does not mean rigidity. It means predictable support. The nervous system continuously evaluates how predictable the body feels. If the trunk, pelvis, and breathing pattern feel unstable, the system will limit distal muscle precision. It will simplify control by reducing degrees of freedom. It will recruit larger, stabilizing patterns. This directly affects how easily you can isolate or refine a specific muscle. If your nervous system does not trust your base, it will not allow subtle control at the edges. This is one of the quiet reasons why people often struggle to feel certain muscles during training. The issue is not the muscle, it is the platform. Breathing plays a critical role in this process. Breathing is not simply an exchange of air, it is one of the primary mechanisms through which internal pressure and trunk stability are regulated. The diaphragm, pelvic floor, abdominal wall, and spinal muscles work together to manage internal pressure and postural tone. This coordination happens rhythmically with every breath. When breathing becomes shallow, held, or irregular under effort, internal pressure management becomes less efficient. The nervous system compensates by increasing muscular co-contraction around the trunk. This creates stiffness. Stiffness can provide short-term stability, but it reduces movement options. As movement options shrink, local muscle control becomes less refined. This is why many people unconsciously hold their breath when performing difficult movements. The nervous system is seeking predictability. Breath holding increases internal pressure rapidly. It creates a temporary sense of control, but it also reduces adaptability. The mind activates muscle more cleanly when breathing remains responsive and integrated with movement rather than suppressed by it. This does not mean forcing deep breathing during exercise. It means allowing breath to participate in the organization of effort. There is another layer to posture that is often misunderstood. Posture is not a static alignment. It is a continuously updated relationship between gravity and muscular tone. The nervous system constantly adjusts how much tone exists in different regions of the body based on perceived balance, head position, and environmental context. If your head position changes, postural tone throughout the body changes. If your visual reference changes, postural tone changes. If your base of support changes, postural tone changes. This is because the nervous system integrates visual, vestibular, and somatosensory information to maintain orientation. Local muscle activation is downstream of this integration. This is why seemingly small changes such as shifting your gaze, repositioning your feet, or adjusting how you distribute weight can dramatically alter how an exercise feels. The mind activates muscle through global orientation before it fine-tunes local force. This also explains why working a muscle in a machine-based environment often feels different from working the same muscle in free space. Machines reduce postural demand, they simplify orientation, they reduce the amount of whole-body organization required. This can make it easier to sense a muscle, but it can also limit how well that activation transfers to real-world movement. Real-world movement always involves balancing against gravity, managing perturbations, and integrating multiple sensory references. Whole-body organization is not an advanced skill. It is the default condition for natural movement. Another important aspect of global organization is how the nervous system distributes effort across chains of muscles rather than single muscles. The body operates through interconnected lines of force. When you push through your foot, force travels through the ankle, knee, hip, trunk, and upper body. When you pull with your arm, the trunk and legs adjust to provide counterbalance. The nervous system controls these relationships. Trying to isolate a muscle without considering its role in a larger movement chain creates conflict within the system. The nervous system resists fragmentation. It prefers coordinated patterns. This does not mean isolation is useless. It means isolation works best when it is framed within an awareness of the whole. This is why cues that reference global organization often unlock local activation more effectively than cues aimed directly at the muscle. For example, noticing how pressure flows through the foot can change hip activation. Noticing how the rib cage moves can change shoulder mechanics. Noticing how the pelvis shifts can change knee control.
The mind activates muscle by reorganizing the system, not by zooming in alone. There is also an important emotional and perceptual dimension to posture. How safe or supported your body feels in space alters your readiness to move. When the nervous system perceives instability, uncertainty, or threat, even at a low level, it biases towards protective postural strategies. These strategies include increased tone in the trunk and proximal muscles. This alters how force is distributed to the limbs. Again, this is not psychological speculation. It is an adaptive control strategy. The nervous system prioritizes survival over refinement. This is why creating a sense of physical safety through stable support surfaces, predictable movement ranges, and slow transitions can dramatically improve the ability to access and refine muscle activation. It gives the nervous system permission to reduce guarding. As guarding reduces, sensory feedback improves. As feedback improves, motor control becomes more precise. The loop repeats. Another overlooked factor in whole-body organization is timing between posture and movement. Postural preparation must precede movement by a fraction of a second. If it lags, the nervous system compensates by stiffening during the movement itself. This is often experienced as clunky or effortful movement. When postural preparation is well-timed, movement feels light and coordinated. This timing is learned. It is not something you consciously schedule. It emerges through repeated experience in which attention allows the nervous system to notice whether movement felt supported or strained. This is one of the reasons slow practice is again so powerful. It gives the nervous system time to detect whether support was organized before movement or patched together afterward. The mind activates muscle more effectively when support is organized in advance. Before we continue, I would like to invite you to notice something quietly. As you sit or stand, gently notice how your breath moves your rib cage and abdomen. Do not change it, just observe. Then notice whether your shoulders, neck, or jaw feel involved in that breathing. Here is the question I would like you to reflect on. When you train or move through difficult tasks, do you experience your body as a connected whole or as a collection of separate parts that must be controlled individually? In the next chapter, we will explore how fatigue, pain history, and past movement experiences reshape mind-muscle connection, and why the nervous system remembers far more than your muscles ever could. Chapter 5. How fatigue, pain history, and experience rewire mind-muscle connection. Up to now, we have spoken as if the nervous system were a neutral organizer,
receiving information, refining patterns, and gradually improving coordination through attention and practice. But the system that activates your muscles is not only a learning system, it is also a protective system. And protection quietly reshapes how your mind connects to your body. Every movement you make is filtered through a history of experience. That history is not stored in your muscles. It is stored in the nervous system's predictions about what is likely, what is safe, and what should be avoided. This is why mind-muscle connection is never created in a vacuum. It is built on memory. Fatigue, for example, does far more than reduce force output. When you become tired, the nervous system changes how it allocates attention, how it estimates effort, and how it predicts stability. Sensory signals become noisier. Timing becomes less precise. The brain compensates by simplifying control. It relies more heavily on broad, well-learned movement patterns. It reduces fine-grained modulation. This is why movements often feel less connected when you are fatigued, even when you are still capable of performing them. The nervous system is protecting efficiency and safety. It is choosing reliability over refinement. This has an important implication. When people attempt to train fine motor awareness or subtle muscle control at the very edge of exhaustion, they are often working against the system's priorities. The nervous system is not in a learning state, it is in a preservation state. This does not make late-stage training useless. It simply means the quality of learning changes. The mind activates muscle differently when the system is managing depletion. Pain history reshapes this relationship even more profoundly. Pain is not simply a sensory event, it is a teaching signal. When pain occurs during movement, the nervous system updates its predictions. It becomes more cautious around similar actions. It alters motor planning to reduce perceived threat. Sometimes this change is obvious. Sometimes it is almost invisible. A movement may look the same from the outside, but internally the control strategy has shifted. More muscles may be co-contracting, timing may be altered, certain ranges may be avoided or rushed through. These changes do not require conscious fear, they occur automatically. The nervous system learns from consequence. One of the most misunderstood aspects of mind-muscle connection is the belief that difficulty activating a muscle after injury means the muscle is weak or damaged. Very often, the muscle is not the limiting factor. The nervous system has simply deprioritized that region. It no longer treats it as a reliable contributor to movement. This is not punishment, it is protection. If a joint, tendon, or muscle group has been associated with discomfort, instability, or uncertainty, the nervous system reduces how much it relies on that structure. It distributes workload elsewhere. It creates alternative solutions. These solutions may keep you functioning, but they often reduce movement efficiency and clarity. This is why people frequently experience long-term changes in movement patterns even after tissue has healed. The tissue recovers, the prediction does not. Mind-muscle connection, in this sense, is a negotiation between what your body can do and what your nervous system believes is safe to do. Another layer of experience that shapes this negotiation is repetition. Repetition builds familiarity. Familiarity reduces computational demand. The nervous system becomes more confident in predicting the outcome of a movement. As prediction becomes easier, the system relies less on incoming sensory data. Control becomes more automated. This is useful, but it has a side effect. Automation reduces awareness. When a movement becomes deeply habitual, attention withdraws from it. Sensory resolution decreases. The nervous system no longer needs to monitor it closely.
This is why people can perform complex actions with very little conscious awareness. It is also why certain muscles become difficult to feel over time. They are doing their job, but they are doing it quietly. The mind activates muscle most vividly during learning, not during mastery. This explains a paradox that often frustrates people. When they begin learning a new movement, they feel everything. When they become good at it, they feel less. The system becomes quieter. This does not mean the connection has weakened. It means the system has become more efficient. However, this efficiency can also make it harder to refine technique later. To reintroduce refinement, attention must be deliberately brought back into the movement. This temporarily disrupts automation. It reopens the loop, and once again, movement may feel awkward before it feels better. Another powerful influence on mind-muscle connection is emotional memory associated with movement. If certain movements have been performed under stress, pressure, or urgency for long periods, the nervous system begins to associate those actions with heightened arousal. Muscle tone increases earlier, breathing becomes more restricted, movement speed increases. The system becomes tuned for performance under constraint. This is common in occupational tasks, military service, emergency work, and physically demanding jobs. The nervous system adapts beautifully to these environments, but when the same patterns are brought into slower, exploratory training contexts, they can interfere with refinement. The system continues to prepare for urgency even when urgency is no longer present. Again, this is not psychological weakness. It is learned organization. The nervous system does not forget contexts easily. It generalizes. This is particularly relevant for people who have spent years moving under load, stress, or time pressure. Their mind-muscle connection is often strong in terms of output. It may be less flexible in terms of modulation. Learning to move more softly, more slowly, or more precisely can feel strangely uncomfortable, not because it is difficult, but because it violates the system's established expectations. This is an important point. Discomfort during slow, attentive movement is not always physical. It is often informational. The nervous system is operating outside of its usual prediction range. The same principle applies to individuals who have lived with chronic pain, long-term injury, or repeated movement failures. Their nervous systems often develop very narrow zones of perceived safety. Movement outside those zones triggers protective strategies. Mind-muscle connection becomes restricted not because muscles cannot activate, but because the system limits exploration. This is why progress in these contexts often requires patience that feels disproportionate to the simplicity of the task. The nervous system is not learning how to move, it is learning that movement is safe again. This also explains why extremely small movements, very light loads, and slow transitions can be disproportionately powerful in rebuilding coordination after disruption. They provide clean evidence. They show the system that prediction and outcome can align without threat. As that evidence accumulates, protective strategies gradually soften. Another dimension of experience that quietly shapes motor control is success history. When the nervous system repeatedly experiences successful movement outcomes, confidence in prediction increases. This reduces the need for excessive stabilization and monitoring. Movement becomes smoother. But if success is always achieved through compensatory strategies, bracing, rushing, avoiding range, or shifting load, the nervous system learns those strategies as its default solution. It does not distinguish between ideal solutions and workable solutions. It only distinguishes between safe outcomes and unsafe outcomes. This is why technique refinement must be paired with outcome success.
If a refined pattern repeatedly fails under load or real-world demands, the nervous system will abandon it. It will return to what works. The mind activates muscle most sustainably when the nervous system can trust that the pattern will succeed in the environments that matter. This brings us to an important practical insight. Improving mind-muscle connection is not primarily about increasing awareness. It is about reshaping prediction. Awareness is the tool. Prediction is the target. When attention, imagery, posture, breath, and experience align to update the nervous system's expectations, muscle activation reorganizes naturally. When experience continues to contradict refined patterns, the system reverts. This is not stubbornness, it is intelligence. Before we move into the conclusion, I would like to offer you a quiet moment of reflection. Think of one movement in your life that feels slightly guarded, awkward, or effortful, even if you can perform it well. It might be standing up from the floor. It might be reaching overhead. It might be running, lifting, or even turning quickly. Now consider this question and let it sit gently rather than trying to answer it immediately. Is your difficulty with that movement more likely to come from weakness in the muscle itself or from what your nervous system has learned to expect from that movement over time? In the final part, we will bring these threads together and look calmly at how understanding mind-muscle connection changes the way we think about movement, effort, and control, not as something to be forced, but as something to be cultivated. Conclusion: how understanding mind-muscle connection changes the way we move. Tonight, we set out to understand a simple phrase that often hides a complex reality: how the mind activates muscle. What we've seen, quietly and steadily, is that muscle activation is not the starting point of movement. It is the visible surface of a much deeper internal process. At the beginning of this lecture, we stated a single guiding idea. This episode would show that the mind does not merely send commands to muscles, but organizes movement by shaping attention, prediction, and sensory awareness before and during every action. Now, after walking through each layer of that system, we can say this simply. Your body does not move because you tell it to. Your body moves because your nervous system believes it understands what will happen next. Movement is built from expectation. In the first chapter, we explored how the nervous system prepares movement long before any muscle contracts. We saw that posture, balance, and coordination are organized in advance through prediction and continuous sensory feedback. Muscle activity is not an instruction, it is a response to an internal model of the body in space. The mind activates muscle by preparing stability, estimating force, and continuously correcting error. What feels like a simple action is actually the final moment of a long internal conversation. In the second chapter, we saw how attention reshapes that conversation. Attention is not simply awareness, it is a biological filter. It determines which sensory signals become precise, which errors are detected, and which patterns are reinforced. Where attention is placed quietly determines what the nervous system learns. When attention is calm and steady, the system becomes more sensitive, more flexible, and more capable of refinement. When attention is rushed or pressured, the system simplifies control and favors safety over precision. In the third chapter, we explored intention and mental imagery. We learned that imagining movement and intending movement activate many of the same planning pathways as physical action. The nervous system rehearses sensory outcomes, not visual scenes. Imagery becomes meaningful when it is embodied, when it includes sensation, timing, and internal awareness. In this way, the mind can prepare muscle activation even when the body is still.
Intention guides the system without needing to control its details. In the fourth chapter, we stepped out of the idea of isolated muscles and into whole body organization. We saw that posture and breathing are not background processes. They are central to how movement is allowed to unfold. The nervous system organizes global stability before it refines local activation. If the body does not feel predictably supported, fine motor control is reduced. Breath, orientation, and balance quietly determine whether subtle muscle activation is even possible. In the fifth chapter, we examined the influence of fatigue, pain history, emotional context, and long-term experience. We learned that mind-muscle connection is shaped by memory. The nervous system remembers what has felt safe, what has felt threatening, and what has worked in the past. It adjusts activation patterns not according to ideals, but according to survival logic. Difficulty connecting to a muscle is often not a failure of strength. It is a reflection of how nervous system has been shaped by experience. Across all of these chapters, one pattern becomes clear. The nervous system is not primarily designed to create perfect movement. It is designed to create reliable movement. Reliability comes before refinement. This understanding changes how we interpret effort. When movement feels disconnected, stiff, or awkward, the problem is rarely located in the muscle itself. It is more often located in how clearly the nervous system can predict the movement and how safely it believes that movement can unfold. The mind activates muscle most effectively when the system trusts the information it is receiving. This also changes how we think about training. More repetitions do not automatically produce better coordination. More load does not automatically produce better awareness. Learning occurs when attention improves sensory resolution, when imagery reshapes expectation, when posture and breath support stability, and when experience gradually updates prediction. Movement quality is not something you impose on the body. It is something the nervous system discovers. Perhaps the most important shift in perspective is this: mind-muscle connection is not a technique. It is a relationship. It is the relationship between perception and action, between expectation and outcome, between safety and exploration. When you learn to notice sensation without urgency, to move slowly enough to feel transitions, to allow breath and posture to participate in effort, you're not controlling your body more tightly. You are giving your nervous system better information. And better information leads to better organization. This also reframes frustration. Awkwardness during slow, attentive movement is not evidence that you are doing something wrong. It is often evidence that the nervous system is reorganizing. Old automated patterns are being softened. New relationships are being tested. Temporary uncertainty is not a problem to eliminate. It is a signal that learning is occurring. In everyday life, this understanding offers something quiet but powerful. It allows you to treat your body with patience instead of force. When a movement feels difficult, you can ask not only what is weak, but what is unclear. Not only what must be strengthened, but what must be better sensed. Not only what must be pushed, but what must be trusted. The mind does not activate muscle by commanding it into obedience. It activates muscle by creating conditions in which coordinated action makes sense. Before we close, I would like to leave you with one gentle question to carry forward into your own movement, your training, and your daily tasks. The next time a movement feels tense, rushed, or disconnected, will you try to notice, just for a moment, whether your nervous system is struggling with effort or struggling with uncertainty? That question alone can quietly change how you listen to your body. This has been The Listening Room, a space for clarity, patience, and understanding. please like and subscribe to this channel. Thank you for listening.